So first things first, we're going to talk about Arkansas. I actually waited to record this episode on Wednesday night. My plan was to record it before the Arkansas game, and then Arkansas actually, just beat Texas, and so I waited until that game actually got to his completion before I recorded this episode, just so that I could have the stats and have everything kind of in front of me. But it does feel like Arkansas may have turned a little bit of a leaf when it came to that Kentucky game. Arkansas is a team that this season has not performed well. Currently they sit at 3-6 in conference, with their only wins being Kentucky, Georgia, and Texas, with some honestly pretty bad losses. Just getting absolutely dominated by Tennessee. No like truly awful losses, but actually just got kind of beat up. Obviously Calipari still knows how to coach, but it does feel like the game is partially passing him by. Ken Palm currently has them projected as of this moment to go 7-11. And there is an outside shot at 14 bids for the SEC. Arkansas is, firmly playing themselves into the NCAA tournament discussion. This isn't something that we expected because just a couple of weeks ago, Boogie Fland announced that he was going to be shutting it down. He hurt his hand, and he was, as of this moment, is their second leading scorer, their leading assist man, was playing kind of the most minutes on the team, their standout freshman. And like I said, due to the hand injury, he was shutting it down for the season, not going to be playing. I think he's going to end up having to have surgery. And so the question really became, what was Arkansas going to do, right? The offseason news was John Tyson, convinces his friend John Calipari to come to Fayetteville and opens up this big pile of NIL money. By most reports, about $6 million for the team. And Calipari puts together the roster. Obviously, a couple of guys from Lexington with him, in Thiero and Wagner and Avicic, but also puts together some star-studded freshmen, gets some other big transfers. And the question was going to be, how was Calipari going to do? One of the big notes was Calipari, was outspoken about only taking 9 guys, or 8 guys actually. The problem with that, that Calipari is running into now, is what happens if somebody gets hurt, and they're firmly in that discussion at this point, right? Because Boogie Fland is now hurt, so you're down to, you're down to 8 guys at this point. If they have another injury, you're really eating into a potential issue if you get into foul trouble or something, right? So this is something that, was criticized when it happened. A lot of coaches and a lot of media around the league kind of were like, hey, why is Calipari only going with 9 guys? But, maybe Cal knows something that nobody else does. He's going to be able to allocate his NIL resources a little differently because he's going to have less mouths to feed. But, at this point, it really feels like, hey, maybe that was an issue. Now, I'm saying that after Arkansas gets 2 solid wins, one on the road in Cal's return to Rupp Arena, one in the Moody Center in Austin. I will say Texas was a huge part of that. In the first half, Texas really could not score at all. In the beginning of the second half, Texas looked like they didn't know how to play basketball. They scored 24 points at the half, and then going about a 6-minute scoring drought to start the second half, and it honestly was shocking that Texas even brought it within a single-digit game, right? Arkansas kind of dominated tip to finish of that game, but it was honestly shocking that Texas was able to claw back as much as they were, especially having some of their better shooters just unable to shoot the ball. So, but we're really talking about Arkansas, right? When you're talking about how Alabama matches up with Arkansas, as in most seasons, I think that Nate Oates knows how to match up pretty well against John Calipari. I think the modern style of Nate Oates' offense, mixed with his physicality that he preaches on defense, is a pretty good matchup for Calipari. For whatever reason, it feels like Nate has found a little bit of a system that works against Cal. I do believe that Nate Oates is going to be able to have some success in this game. I also think that Alabama being on the road is a huge deal in this game. And the reason I bring that up is there was a stat posted over on Twitter that in conference road games, right? Alabama has to this point had 4 conference road games and 5 conference home games. Alabama's shooting 40% from 3 on the road, just to 33% at home. They're 5th in turnovers on the road versus 13th at home. 1st in offensive efficiency on the road versus 8th at home. 7th in offensive rebounding on the road versus 7th at home. 2nd versus 7th. And then 1st in free throw rate versus 5th in free throw rate. Right? And those stats obviously bear this out to fruition, right? When you look at Alabama's, how Alabama has performed on the road, they have gone to Texas A&M. They went to Rupp Arena. They went to Starkville. And against all 3 teams, they really dominated. They were able to play their game and do what it took to win those games. And I think that Alabama, for whatever reason, has a little bit more swagger when they play on the road. It feels like they have something to prove, and that plays well for the Alabama team. So I do think that going on the road on a Saturday night game in Bud Walton Arena, my expectation is, especially after the back-to-back wins, it's going to be pretty packed. They may have some energy back in the fan base a little bit, especially after the win against Kentucky and win against Texas, right? Now you're pushing for an NCAA tournament bid that, just 2 weeks ago did not really seem like it was a possibility. So it really feels like the fan base may have something to cheer for. So I think Alabama will have a little bit of something to prove in that game. I also think this is a situation where Nate Oates has had an entire week to talk about to look at different things and talk with the team about what the issues have been, right? Nate Oates talked about how turnovers were going to be a huge focal point for him and for the team for this off week, because he knew that, winning in the way that you won against Georgia with 20 turnovers is not something you can rely on. You're going to have to clean up the turnover problems. So I think Nate is fully aware of what the issues currently are with this team. And I think that with a week to prepare, often like when you saw LSU come in and play against Alabama after a week to prepare, oftentimes a team is able to clean up. The other thing that you have to look at is a health standpoint, right? This is a week of LeBaron Philon and Darion Reed being able to get healthy. I think both of those cannot go overstated enough. I think both of those are very important when you're looking at Alabama being ready to play against a team like Kentucky. Again, not saying they're the most deep team. They are. The guys who they have are very competent and obviously do all play, but they are not somebody that's just going to rotate bodies on top of bodies. They have their 8 guys that play, and that's who they're going to have playing. So Alabama is going to have a little bit of an edge in terms of people that they can rotate in and out. The other thing that you have to look at when you're looking at a team like Kentucky is they do have a lot of talent, right? When you look at a John Calipari coach team, this is not, even though the meshing of the team has not gone super well, right? They lose their first 5 SEC games. This is a team that definitely has the ability to shoot well, right? I would not expect them to shoot as well as they did in the Kentucky game. In that Kentucky game, they shot 52% from 3. But I will say in the Texas game, they shot 41% from 3. Both of these numbers well above their 33% average for the season, right? So there is a situation where it is possible that with the week off to prepare that Arkansas had before that Kentucky game, that they were able to work on some things that were causing them issues, and Arkansas was able to find a little bit of something. Personally, I'm going to chalk it up a little bit to Kentucky's lack of defense, and I think that Texas just, quite frankly, is not that great. I think that Texas had a really poor shooting night, and I don't think their defense is really the best either. And so I do think that Arkansas's good shooting also can just be linked to some poor defense on the other side. But you have to give credit where credit is due, right? Arkansas, over the past 2 games, has shot much better than they have over the last few, right? However, simply put, the thing that you have to know when you're playing Alabama, and what I think this game comes down to, is can Arkansas score enough points? And the reason I say that is Arkansas is the 86th fastest tempo team in the country, including 68th fastest offense. When you look at their SEC games, Arkansas has scored over 80 points just one time. And really, when you look at Arkansas for the entire season against high major games, the only time that they've scored over 80, they scored over 80 twice against Kentucky, but I'm going to consider that one a little bit of an anomaly. That was Cal's return to Rupp. And then against Michigan when they won 89-87, right? Alabama is a team that regularly is going to play with the pace, and Arkansas has played with that pace a lot this season, right? They've been up in the 73, 74. They had a 78 possession game against Michigan, right? Alabama is going to want to push that pace. And Arkansas, due to their athletes and how Calipari wants to do it, he's going to be okay with them pushing the pace. The question is, can Arkansas keep up from a scoring perspective? Arkansas just has not shown it this season their ability to score with some of the best teams in the conference. I think that Alabama is going to be able to just purely outscore them. However, that being said, Arkansas does have a pretty good defense, right? This is a team that has, the 8th highest block percentage in the country. This is a team that plays pretty good defense. They do not let you assist on a ton of shots. They're near top 75 in that, right? This is a team that on paper is very good, but as you kind of have seen shake out this season, maybe has not clicked. But the question really remains, did they click in that off week? Or was the Kentucky and Texas games a little bit of an anomaly? I think the Kentucky game you can kind of hold out by itself, but I do think the Texas game you need to think about for sure, because this is obviously in back-to-back games, both of which on the road, Arkansas has performed pretty well. Now, do I think super highly of Texas? No, but at the end of the day, they still took care of business. They let Texas come back, but they were able to, get an 8-point win in a game that Ken Palm and most computers have projected about an 8-point loss, right? Simply put, I do think that Alabama just has more talent, and has more talent and knows how to use it better, right? I think that as much as Arkansas on paper, is okay, there is a situation where I do think that Alabama is playing as a team much more. Arkansas feels sometimes just like some guys hooping, and that is a problem, right? When we're looking at what Alabama is going to be focused on, Alabama seems to be trying to fix little inaccuracies in, hey, if we do this slightly better, it's going to lead to this result, right? Alabama is more fine-tuning how they have played this season versus Arkansas feels like they're trying to make sure that these last two games weren't a fluke. I really think that in this Alabama-Arkansas game, this is going to come down to, can Arkansas keep pace? I fully expect Alabama to be ready to play on the road. Honestly, I would be more concerned about this game if Arkansas had lost against Kentucky and Texas. And the reason I say that is Alabama at some points in the season has played up and down to its competition. And Arkansas still has the talent, and I think they've proven that with the wins against Kentucky and Texas, right? But at times it really has felt like Alabama played down to the competition. But I think Arkansas coming off of the 2 wins is going to show Alabama, hey, these guys can win, right? Look how hard it was for you guys to win in Rupp. Arkansas did the same thing, and they dominated for a huge stretch of that game, right? That's what Alabama is going to be able to point to and show, hey, Arkansas is a decent team. I'm not saying they're the best team in the country, but they're a decent team, and they absolutely have the talent to be able to win against some of the better teams in the league. I do expect that Alabama is going to, especially if you can get some extra minutes out of like Darion Reed, LeBaron Philon. I know both of those guys coming back from injury, it's tough to know exactly what you can expect, but a really physical guy and a big, solid defender like Darion Reed would be really good to have against like an Adou Thiero. I do think also you're going to get a lot of play out of like a Mohamed Diabate as long as he's, as well healthy in this game. Again, like a Thiero, like how physical he is, and how kind of a bruiser that he is. I think that's where like a Darion Reed or a Mohamed Diabate are going to get a lot of play, because Adu Thiero has taken a much better step up and much better role in the absence of Boogie Flan. Another guy is John L. Davis. If he continues to find his shot and find a little bit more of what made him so good at Florida Atlantic, this team also could kind of go on a little bit of a run. When you look at what he had done over the past games, he had not played great coming back from the injury. But in the last two games against Texas and Kentucky, he goes 50% from three in both games, 18 against Kentucky, 24 against Texas, right? So you're finding a little bit more of the Johnny Davis that you saw at Florida Atlantic, right? So that's obviously what Calipari was looking for when you saw when he recruited him, when he got him to come over to Arkansas, right? So I think it's partially a situation of this is trying to actually have the team fully mesh, and have a team, do what they do. I will say the thing that is similar to when I talked about the Georgia game, I thought that Nate Oates was going to have a little bit of extra, I'm not going to say care about the game, but a little bit of extra emphasis, was because Nate and Mike White have recruited against each other a couple of times, like Darion Reed and Asa Newell. Similarly, Nate Oates and Calipari recruited against each other quite a lot for some of the nation's top talent. Boogie Flan, Billy Richmond, two guys that Nate Oates definitely had very highly on his list. Boogie Flan for a long percentage looked like he may be coming to Alabama, and then Kentucky, and then Arkansas kind of swoops in and was able to land him. So those are some things also to note when you look at some of these teams that Nate Oates recruits against on a night in, night out basis. It does sometimes feel like if the game gets out of hand or whatever, Nate tries to keep his foot on the gas as much to kind of show the guys like, hey, did you choose the right coach, right? There is a little bit of ego there. Not to be unsportsmanlike or anything, but Nate definitely wants to kind of show the guys like, hey, like you should have come and played for us. This is what you're missing out on, right? So I do think that that's something that, you just have to consider when you're looking at these games against like a Georgia, a Calipari with Arkansas, or whoever, that Nate is regularly going up against multiple recruiting battles, or there's multiple guys on the roster that Nate actively recruited a lot. Also, with the amount of film that Nate and Pannone and everybody watch, they're going to know a little bit more about some of those guys that they have recruited a little bit more heavily, know what some of their weaknesses are, some of their strengths. So that is something also just to consider. Obviously, in this case, Richmond comes off the bench and doesn't play as much. If Boogie Flan was still in the game, it would be a little bit different, but that is something also just to consider when you're looking at a Nate versus a coach he goes up against in recruiting a lot. Like I said, I do think this game comes down to a pace thing. I do think this game comes down to Arkansas is going to try to obviously create turnovers. Arkansas is going to try to play sound defense, but I do think that Nate Oates' style does well against John Calipari. I think Nate Oates knows how to attack it, and I think that Alabama has done enough, especially on the road, for me to have confidence in them. I am going to pick Alabama in this game, and I'm actually going to pick Alabama fairly large. I know KenPom and some other projections have this at about a 4 to 5 point game. I'm actually going to put this at about a 12-point game. And I think that Alabama wins this game in the neighborhood of 88 to 76, 75. Like I said, I do think that Alabama is going to be able to push the pace. I think that Alabama is going to be able to have the offense to be able to just lay it on Arkansas. Honestly, this game would not shock me if Alabama won this game by more. Like I said, there's something that Alabama has found when they've played on the road this season. And I do think that Arkansas beating Kentucky and Texas has me more confident in this game than I was maybe 2 weeks ago. like I said, I was really concerned that Arkansas was going to come into this game, have a top 3 team coming into their home arena, and have something that they needed to prove because they were 1-7 in 1-8 in conference. But instead, Arkansas has won 2 games and is on a little bit of an upturn, and Alabama now can look, this is what this team is capable of. We need to play to our potential, right? In a perfect world, you don't need that for your team to play to its potential, but I have seen some times this season where Alabama plays up or down to its competition. Obviously, didn't exactly happen in the Georgia game, but we definitely saw it in, for example, that LSU game. So that is something that concerns me a little bit when I look at this team. So I do think that Alabama, like I said, I do think that Alabama wins this game. I do think that Alabama is able to pull off a solid win. If Alabama was to win by more than the 12, I don't think that it would fully shock me, but I think 12 is what I'm going to go with. So if you are interested in all the content, like I said, I will put out a pregame thread as always. That's going to be over on Twitter. And then there will be a recap episode that's going to come out late Sunday night, as I typically do. I probably will go ahead and record Sunday after I get home from church, and then I'll put that out Sunday evening like I have been.